Hey everybody, welcome again to another edition of B&B Hockey Talk. I'm Aaron Bloxel with my co-host, Mr. Matt Balzer. Today, August the 24th, Friday, as we continue the Vancouver Canucks breakdown team preview. We're going to talk today about the defense and the goaltenders. So let's get right into it. Let's go right into the defense. What do you think there, Matt? What do you got for starting defense? Well, let's talk about all their players. I mean, they've got lots of guys that should be on this team, lots of guys that are on this team, and lots of guys who want to be on this team. So let's jump right in.
All right. Yeah, so the Canucks are returning with the same D-core as last year, which I know many fans are just absolutely thrilled to see that, which, oh, man, this defense is pretty disappointing to look at. It's just you look and you shake your head, just like how you can come back with the same D as you had last year. But getting into all the guys, I have the top pairing as Alex Edler and Troy Stecher. Second pairing, Ben Hutton and Chris Tanev. Third pairing, Michael Del Zotto and Eric Branson, with Derek Pouliot and Alex Biega as the two extra defensemen. Alex Edler has been the backbone for this defense, and basically literally the only guy contributing consistent offense from the back end. Last year, I don't think he broke as many sticks as he usually did. As if you follow the Canucks, that guy can break a stick like every second game, and you just like, how is that even possible? Like, why don't you up your flex, on your stick? But first half of the season, he dealt with injuries, only played in 29 games, and had 1 goal, 9 points. But in the second half, he played all 41 games and had 5 goals and 25 points. Which point production wise is really good, and he showed really often at times that he liked to shoot from the point, which was sometimes frustrating, especially on the power play when you want Besser shooting, and Edler would continually refuse to pass Besser the puck on the power play. But in the end, in the second half of the season, he was still really productive, and then within point totals, he had 34 points. 6 goals in 70 games. Stecher took a bit of at least offensively, took a step back. His rookie season, he had 24 points and 3 goals in 71 games. And this year, he only had 11 points in 68 games. He dealt with, I believe it was a knee or ankle injury that he suffered in Detroit, which set him back. But once when he came back to the lineup, they paired him with Edler. And both of those guys were pretty steady on that pairing. I think Stecher, I'd like him to get put into more offensive opportunities, maybe on that second power play unit, because outside of Derek Pouliot and Alex Edler, there aren't really truly natural offensive defensemen on this team right now until Quinn Hughes finally makes the jump, most likely next year. Chris Tanev, the most consistent and I think one of the most underrated defensemen in the NHL. Big thing for him has been health. He only played 42 games last year. The year previous, he only played 53. The year previous that, 69. And the most games he's played in his NHL career is 70 in a season. So as his health has declined, his numbers have still really been good. Like, he was a +7. I know the plus minus isn't as big for some people as it used to be, but a +7 on the Vancouver Canucks, especially from their season last year, is really good. And he still had 11 points. We'll see if he does end up getting traded, seeing that he still has 2 years left on his contract at a really decent price. And Ben Hutton will be the last guy I touch on before we get to the other guys. But Hutton had probably the most disappointing season, and probably the most head-scratching out of all the players on their back end. He had 0 goals and only 6 assists in 61 games. Which was going back to his rookie season a couple of years ago. He had 25 points in 75 games, and then his sophomore, he had a bit of the sophomore slump with only 19 points. But it looked like early in his rookie year that the Canucks had a bit of a steal here. And it looked like he could get into that 30, 35-point range consistently. But he had issues with Travis Green, and there was stuff about his fitness. I'm hoping coming into this year that he will get back to where he was in his rookie season, and that he does get a shot to play with a guy like Chris Tanev, other than Eric Goodbranson, who we'll get into. We both have differing opinions on him.
Well, we can agree on the top 8 and potential pairings. I think if they go with 14 forwards to start the season, you're going to see Alex Biega have to go through waivers to the farm, and they may lose the pit bull, the bulldog. But I definitely think we're going to see an improvement this year out of both Stetcher and Hutton with their offensive numbers. As Hutton's agent said, he's in the best shape of his life. I know the fitness was in question, but I think Travis Green's biggest thing, without saying it publicly, was his lack of professionalism or lack of seriousness, because he is a jokester, he is a prankster, and I think he had some growing up to do. And it sounds like he's doing everything the team's asking him this summer, and I think he's going to be poised to come back. Edler and Tanev, what can you say about them? I mean, they call him Steady Eddie for a reason. And Chris Tanev, unfortunately, has become the new Sammy Salo on this team, where everything seems to, happen to him, and he becomes part of that game operation where you don't want to touch him or something happens, right? And then the third pairing, Delzato and Goodbranson, both veteran guys. And I definitely think the Canucks can improve here. I do like both players when they're on their A game, but they need a lot better consistency. Goodbranson, as you mentioned, we have conflicting thoughts and ideas about him. I do like Eric Goodbranson. He's got great size. He can be a physical presence. But I think with him, I want to see what he can do over the course of an entire season. Where he doesn't get hurt. And I think a lot of Canuck fans will actually start to like this guy if they see him playing consistently. But that's going to be the key, is consistent play. And, of course, Derek Pouliot they picked up last year. I actually don't mind Derek Pouliot at all. I actually like him better than Delzato and Goodbranson. But because they're veterans and are a little bit more consistent. Pouliot started pretty good last season. And he seemed to tail off a little bit until Travis Green made him a healthy scratch. But we know with this defense core, there's going to be injuries. These guys are all going to get a chance to play. And I know both you and I are absolutely, down that Quinn Hughes has decided not to play, because I think he would be easily this team's best defenseman going into this season. Now, we're going to touch on some of the other defensemen. You can retouch on some of these guys as well. But Olli Juolevi, we both think have a chance to potentially make this squad this year. If not, he'll get a lot of playing time down in Utica. But what about some of the other guys? Some of the guys like Ashton Schottner, Evan McEnany, Jalen Chatfield, Guillaume Brisebois. Why don't you touch on some of those guys? And you can also touch on Delzato and Goodbranson since you haven't yet.
Yeah, so Delzato and Goodbranson, I could care less for, to put it politely. Goodbranson, I still hate the trade, even though McCancel hasn't come into like that first round pick that he was. But I still think we gave up a lot, and the contract that they did give Goodbranson, the 3-year extension at $4 million for a guy that's missed an entire season. If you combine both seasons with the Canucks, he only played 30 games in his first season and only 52 last year. So that's 82 games that he's missed over the past 2 years. And when he has played, I haven't really been overly impressed. He was supposed to be this big physical defenseman, tough to play against in his own zone, and I don't think he's been physical enough in his play. So I would like to see him just be a little bit more physical, be tougher in his own zone, because if he's not to be putting up that many points, like he only had 5 points last year, and he only had like 5 or 6 the year previous. If he's not to be putting up points, you got to be tough. You got to be like the Willie Mitchell type of defenseman, where you can just shut down the other team's top players. And Del Zotto, it's just Michael Del Zotto. It's like he doesn't really bring a whole lot. Like I'd rather see Derek Pouliot on that bottom pairing. And with Del Zotto being a UFA at the end of the year, I think they should trade him either before the season starts or before the trade deadline to get something from him. And Alex Edler also is an unrestricted free agent at the end of this year, but he has a no trade clause, so I don't think he will be moved. They might try to extend him, even though I'd like to see what they could get in the open market for him. But he holds all the keys for a trade. And Biega, I'm a fan of Biega, like getting him in the lineup here and there, because I think consistently over an entire season, I don't think he can keep up to the playing level that he can at times. But when you inject him into the lineup here and there, he brings a whole lot of energy. Yeah. And sometimes there were a few games where it's just like, hey, Alex Biega is our best player on our back end at points, which is, you shouldn't ever say that in a sentence. But yeah, to get to their younger guys, Ashton Stotner, he got called up towards the end of last season, got into 5 games, had 2 assists, and should have had a goal if it wasn't for a dumb offside challenge, where he would have had a perfect bar down goal for his first ever NHL goal. But I did see him live. I went to the Anaheim Ducks game towards the end of the year, right before the Sedins announced that they were going to retire. And I really liked his game. He was really gritty. There was stuff like once when the puck moved, he'd give a guy an extra shot, and he'd get under guys' skin. And I wouldn't mind seeing him over a guy like Michael Del Zotto, if he can bring a physical, gritty, sort of like what I want Gudbranson to be on that back end. Evan McEnany, I think this will be the biggest question mark to see what happens here. He only played 11 games down in Utica, but he had 7 points. And the year previous, he had 23 points in 60-something games with Utica. But he had a huge point streak that year, maybe like about like a 10-game plus point streak in that year. And before he tore, I believe it was his ACL that ended his season. Offensively, he was doing really well, and I think he could have an outside shot of maybe pushing for some time with the Canucks. And Olli Juolevi, this is the guy, the biggest question mark going for the Canucks out of all their prospects. People want to see where Juolevi's at. The year previous at the Young Stars tournament in Penticton, he looked just awful. He just didn't look like that number 5 or the 5th overall pick that he was chosen to be. Because I was actually super hyped when they did draft him the year that he played at the World Juniors, where he had Puljujärvi and Lane, and all those guys, and he was that top defenseman on that team as a 17-year-old. And man, he could run a power play, he could set those guys up, but he struggled after. But he didn't play. Then he moved from the London Knights to the Finnish Elite League this year, and he started off a bit slow, but he ended up with 19 points, 7 goals in 38 games. Then he had another 7 points in 11 playoff games. And I think that the move was really helpful. Sammy Salo was an assistant coach there. And he said as the year went along, Juolevi became one of their best defensemen. And I'm hoping his first year pro that he can prove a lot of us wrong, that he can prove his draft status and get into the NHL sooner rather than later. Because if he is ready, I would like to see him on that bottom pair.
Of course, I think he has to he'll probably start in Utica. But hey, I'm very curious about him too, because they drafted him so high. But sometimes defensemen take a little longer to come along, and I'm okay if the team waits a little bit and are patient with him. I mean, he's still very young. He still has a lot of room to grow, and I'm waiting for him. I can't wait to see what his upside is. I totally agree with you. Alex Biega absolutely brings a ton of energy to the game. He can't consistently do it, unfortunately, but he is a good guy to have around. and whatnot. But yeah, you didn't maybe touch on Jalen Chatfield a little bit and Guillaume Brisebois. I know Chatfield last year had a great preseason. He had, I think, a point a game in preseason before they let him go down to Utica. And he was like a big surprise and a big lot of talk about him and his play. I remember one game he had a goal, assist, and a fight against, I think it was the Ducks. And then Guillaume Brisebois, the Canucks are really high on this guy. He's taken a couple of years to develop, but they really like where he's going. And I don't know if there's some favoritism there, but there is talk that there is a bit of favoritism based out of from some connection with the Quebec League where he came from. But they seem to be really high on him. They keep talking about how this guy's going to be an NHLer. Why don't you comment on those two guys, and we'll get into a couple that are even younger players.
Yeah, so Brisebois, I haven't seen a whole lot on, but Jim Benning seems pretty high on him. He had 18 points in 68 games for Utica last year. But the big thing is I haven't seen enough from him, but I still think he'll be another year away before he does get a call-up with the Canucks. And Jalen Chatfield, I was really impressed in the preseason about how well he played. He sort of looked like a Chris Tanev-like player. But down in the American League, he only had 7 points in 60 games, being more on the defensive side. So I'd like to see in the preseason and training camp where exactly he's at, because I was very impressed with him last year in the preseason. And I think he may have an outside shot at up this year. Might be the same thing with Brisebois, where he has another year down in Utica to develop. But yeah, I think he has some upside there. But the thing is, a lot of these defensemen are sort of like in that defensive side. Outside of Juolevi, they don't have like a whole lot of offensive upside, which is what the Canucks really need on their back end.
And I think Jalen Chatfield reminded me of a young Brandon Montour out of the Anaheim Mighty Ducks League. That's how he looked to me in preseason, and I thought there was a lot of upside to him. He did struggle a bit at times. Maybe he had a little bit of heartbreak being cut and sent down to Utica after such a great camp. But it'll be interesting to track his season this year and see what he does. Let's get into a few other guys. I don't know if you want to comment on Tony Uutinen, Jack Rathbone, who I think is playing amazing right now in the NCAA, and of course ex-Canuck playing in the KHL, the giant Nikita Triumphant. And then after, if you want to touch on any of those guys, we're going to touch on the two big draft picks from this year, Mr. Quinn Hughes, who we're both excited about, and of course Jet, the guy that stood out and threw some big monster hits at that Team Canada summer camp.
All right, yeah. So Tony Uutinen, I watched him at the summer tournament there with Canada, Finland, Sweden. And I was out. He didn't stand out a whole lot, but he was very good defensively in his own end. I'd like to see offensively where he was, but at the under 18s, he captained the Finnish team, and he led the back end in points. And was a big standout for them. So I am intrigued to see where he is, and it could be a steal in the 5th round. Nikita Triumphant, well, this is the guy that the Canucks should have in their lineup if they hadn't screwed everything up with that situation. But yeah, if you look at what could be the Canucks back end in a few years with Quinn Hughes, Jet Wu, maybe Stetcher. We'll see how Hutton does. Goodbranson, and a guy. If we can get Triumphant back and Juolevi, they got some pieces here. And if Edler sticks around, that you start to see that they're starting to get younger. And the big thing is, as Benny wanted to point out, is getting faster and more skill at every position, and especially their back end. You really need guys that can skate, because guys like Goodbranson and Del Zotto, they aren't exactly the quickest. And if when we get guys like Quinn Hughes and Juolevi, guys that can really skate and move the puck, that'll help our forwards score more, because that's like been the biggest thing the past few years, is how low the Canucks have scored. Like, they only scored 218 goals last year, and that was 26th in the league. And I think over like the past 3 years, I think I heard that they were the lowest scoring team in the NHL. So if your back end can't feed your forwards into those offensive opportunities, that will be a really big struggle for them. And Jet Wu, their second round pick. I'll quickly touch on him. I think being a right-handed defenseman, that will be huge for the Canucks, because on their right side, outside of Chris Tanev and possibly Troy Stetcher, there isn't a whole lot that I like on that right side, and there isn't a whole lot in the system coming up. He has Hughes and Levy are both lefties, so they're pretty crowded on that side, but they need something to come up on that right side in the system.
Yeah, for me, Jet Wu, I didn't know a whole lot about him when they drafted him, but I'm very impressed with not only his speed and his size, but he definitely is a really physical body. And I really like the fact that the Canucks drafted a guy like that. They definitely could use a player that can run around a little bit and make keep other teams honest, keep their heads up a little bit. And he looks like a pretty solid stay-at-home defenseman. But Quinn Hughes, we both agree, should be in this roster this year. Unfortunately, it sounds like he's going back to Michigan State. His edge work on his skating is by far – I mean, he's already the best skater on the Canucks back end. I'm really excited about this guy. I'm really looking forward to seeing him play in this lineup, because he can quarterback a power play. And, what would be even more exciting is if the Canucks can somehow get that lottery pick and draft his brother, so we can have another brother combination for years to come here in Vancouver. Maybe even there's 3. I know there's another Hughes boy coming up in the system too. So but anyways, hey, if you guys like what we're talking about, leave a comment about what you think about the Canucks defense. Remember to like or share this post. Subscribe to us on YouTube. But we're going to get into goaltending now. I know we both know Markstrom and Nelson are back, both really big bodies. Markstrom being 6'5", Nelson being 6'6". And we're going to touch on Thatcher Demko, Mike DiPietro, Richard Bachman, and Matt Thiessen a little bit as well. You being the goaltender specialist, what do you like? Why don't we touch on that?
Yeah, so Markstrom, I'm still a decent fan of him. He showed at times last year that he can be a number one goalie and consistently play really well. It's just those lapses where he, where he lets in like a really weak goal, and it just totally throws the team off. But he did have times where he played really well and only let in one goal, and then he got no offensive support. And then there's times where he let in a lot of goals, and then the Canucks actually ended up scoring some for him, but still losing. So it's just getting that consistent play. Like, his numbers were actually pretty decent for the team in front of him. He went 23, 26, and 7 in 60 games, 9.12 save percentage, a 2.71 goals against average, and 2 shutouts. The big thing is that he finally got his first career shutout this year. There was a big thing that he I forget how many games he played, but it would have been the longest set of games to start an NHL career without getting a shutout, and he finally got it this year. I'm glad he won out as the number one goalie, because starting at the beginning of the season, Nielsen and Markstrom were splitting starts, and for a goalie, it's tough when you're splitting starts and you want to get into that groove, because the more you play, the more consistent your play starts to get. And with them splitting, like, Nielsen started off with like the 2 shutouts and like the first like 4 or 5 starts that he had, but in the second half, Nielsen completely fell off. He only went 1-8-3 over 13 games, and really struggled at times. Though I know he played for Sweden at the World Championships, and he won gold with them. But then again, that is a very strong Swedish team, and their team was pretty stacked compared to some other teams in that tournament. I would like to see Nielsen get traded so Demko can come up as the backup goalie this year. Because I think as much as you want your goalies to develop just a little bit longer into like maybe like 23, 24 years old, I think Demko is ready to get into the NHL next year. That one game that he played, I think, was huge for him, and it was big for him as well that he mentioned to the organization to get that one game in. So he had something to build over the off season to prepare for. He showed that his game to Demko, this guy's flexibility is like crazy stupid, like sort of like Jonathan Quick, like doing the splits for like 2 minutes or whatever while scrambles go on. This guy's flexibility and his upside is super high. The one game that he did get into, I think 5-on-5, he was pretty well, played pretty well, but I think it was more on the power play. He struggled a little bit just with those quick plays and reading the play where it would be. But in the AHL, he was an all-star. He was one of the best goalies in the American League. Played in 46 games in the regular season, went 25, 13, and 4, a .922 save percentage, one shutout, and a 2.44 goals against average. And in the 5 playoff games, they went up against the Toronto Marlies, and in that first round. And until the Marlies got to the finals, Utica was the only team to beat them in the playoffs. They pushed them to 5 games in the first round. Demko going 2-3, had a .927 save percentage over that series, and was basically one of the main reasons why Utica was in any contention in that series, because how well he played. So just how good his numbers were in the American League, it's sort of along that Corey Schneider lines, where we'll see if he spends another year full time in Utica, or if they finally bump him up as a backup role, which I think he is ready for.
Well, I think I'm on the same page with you, Jack. Markstrom is a solid number one when he can apply a little bit more consistency. He had that stretch where he was letting in that 1 week goal every game that seemed to deflate the team and the building for that matter. Nilsson started the year super strong, and I really liked his game. He seemed to fall apart, in my opinion, when Travis Green would get angry at him at practice. There was a lot of, I guess, choice words said about his play, and he seemed to fall apart a little bit from it. I think if he can get consistent, because of his size, I see some potential for him to still be better. But at this time in his career, for him not to be consistent, I don't see him being anything more than a backup in the future. I am a big, huge Thatcher Demko fan. I actually believe that this guy, if he had a big enough training camp, he could be the starting goalie for the Canucks this year. Like, I think he can beat Markstrom for the starting position. He had the one game, like you said, in the NHL last year. It was against Tampa Bay. So when you're facing Kucherov and Stamkos and Hedman on the power play, I think I'd be pretty worried about stopping the puck too. When you're
it was Columbus that they played against.
Oh, my bad. I thought it was Tampa for some reason. But Columbus, we're not going to sell them short either. They still had a pretty good power play.
Yeah.
But, yeah, so Demko, I can see him potentially wrestling the starting position away from Markstrom. But worst case scenario, he's going to be the starter in Utica again. But I think he's already done everything he can do in Utica. So I think I'd really like to see him get a shot this year, either as the backup or potentially the starter. Let's touch on the depth goalies. I am a big fan of DiPietro. He's the third stringer at the World Championships for Team Canada this year. Got a little taste of the action. Never got to play, but got to be around the team and that environment. And he looks poised to be the starter for the World Junior team this year for Team Canada. This guy's numbers are insane in junior. He is a small goalie compared to the other three that we've talked about. But to me, he's very quick. And it reminds me of a guy like Mike Vernon, where he's just quicker than the shots, and his reactions are very good. But yeah, why don't we touch on him a little bit, and of course the other depth guys.
Yeah, so DiPietro, I am pretty intrigued to see how this guy develops as he turns pro after this coming year. I think at the Young Stars tournament in the inter squad games, I think his athleticism went. Sometimes it helped him really really well, and sometimes he overplayed the puck at times, and that led to a couple of goals. But I think his upside is very high because as long as he can control, like not overplaying the play as it comes down, I think and he uses that in a really good way. I think he can be a good NHL goalie. But we will see a big thing will be the World Junior Tournament this coming year. But he did lead Windsor to the Memorial Cup the year previous, and even on as Windsor traded everybody away this year in the OHL, he was still really consistent for them. He won 29, 21, and 1 in 56 games for Windsor. Had 7 shutouts and 9-1 save percentage for a team that wasn't really in any way in contention in the OHL this past year. And he was named the OHL Goalie of the Year as well. So there's a lot of upside. I can't wait to see him play for Canada at the World Juniors. Richard Bachman, they gave a 2-year extension for. Just a veteran presence in the net in the American League. And if there are multiple injuries to goalies, which you never know, at least he does have some NHL experience. Even though he is more on the smaller side, I think he is actually still a decent goalie. And Matthew Thiessen, the other goalie they drafted in this year's draft, from what I saw at the inter-squad game, he was big. He kept the puck in front of him. But I'll still need to see more of him, just because there's only a limited amount of time I've seen him. But big goalie, which is always good. But yeah, we'll see how he develops over the years.
Yeah, Thiessen, I think, had a strong junior A Tier 2 season, I believe, right? He played in the Saskatchewan Junior Hockey League.
Yeah.
And he was on a championship team that, if I'm not mistaken, competed in the Canadian Championships after winning not just their league, but they also beat off the Manitoba champions. So it's always good to draft the winner. And this guy, he's still young, so I'd say another year or two in junior before he makes a jump. I can see him being in Utica or wherever the Canucks farm team might be in the next couple of years. Bachman, I think, is pretty consistent. He's good to have around in case of injury, but I'm curious to know what they're going to do with DiPietro. I'm pretty sure he'll play one more year at junior. But I'd like to – I personally would love to see him in Utica this year, also getting that experience and playing pro against guys that can score. So final words on the goaltenders before we wrap it up?
Yeah, so the goalie, we'll see how. I'm hoping for consistent play. That's the biggest thing. If we can get consistent play from Markstrom, Demko, and Nielsen, depending on who wins out the backup role, that'll be huge for the Canucks. Because I think Markstrom in the second half of the year, once we started playing consistently over Nielsen, I think he really started to gel and play really well. But yeah, I'm just hoping for Demko to get into the NHL in that backup role and show everybody that he can be that big number one goalie that we drafted him to be. So
guys, that's our conclusion to our Canucks team preview. Today we've talked about the defense and the goaltending. If you didn't see our episode yesterday about the forwards, go ahead and look back on our Facebook page or on YouTube. Remember to like us and subscribe. This is B&B Hockey Talk, and I'm Aaron Bloxel with my co-host Matt Balzer. Thanks so very much for joining. Have a fantastic weekend, everybody, and we'll be back here next Monday as we start getting into new subjects as we're done our 31 teams in 31 days. So we're excited to bring these to you every single day during the week, and we will see you all next week. Take care.